By the time I was 10, I was totally ashamed of my father. All my, all my friends called him names. Quasino, Hunchback, Monster, Little Frankenstein, the crooked little man with a crooked little cane. At first it hurt when they called him those things, but soon I found myself agreeing with them. He was ugly, and I knew it. My father was born with something called null dwarfism. The disease made him stop growing when he was about 13 and caused his body to twist and turn into a grotesque shape. It wasn't too bad when he was a kid. I saw pictures of him when he was about my age. He was a little short, but quite good looking. Even when he met my mother and married her when he was 19, he still looked pretty normal. He was still short and walked with a slight limp, but he was able to do just about anything. Mother said he even used to be a great dancer. Soon after my birth, things started to getting worse. Another genetic disorder took over and his left foot started turning out, almost backwards. His head and neck shifted over to the right. His neck became rigid and he had to look over his left shoulder a bit. His right arm curled in and up, and his index finger almost touched his elbow. His spine warped to look something like a big old roller coaster, and it caused his torso to lie sideways instead of straight up and down like a normal person. His walk became slow, awkward, and deliberate. He had to almost drag his left foot as he used his deformed right arm to balance his gait. I hated to be seen with him. Everyone stared. They seemed to pity me. I knew he must have done something really bad to have God hate him that much. By the time I was 17, I was blaming all my problems on my father. I didn't have the right boyfriends because of him. I didn't drive the right car because of him. I wasn't pretty enough because of him. I didn't have the right jobs because of him. I wasn't happy because of him. Anything that was wrong with me or my life was because of him. It was my father. If my father had been good-looking like Jane's father, or successful like Paul's father, or worldly like Terry's father, I would have been perfect. I knew that for sure. The night of my senior prom came, and Father had to place one more nail in my coffin. He had volunteered to be a chaperone at the dance. My heart just sank when he told me. I stormed into the room, slammed the door, threw myself on my bed, and cried, 3 more weeks and I'll be out of here. I screamed into my pillow, 3 more weeks and I'll have graduated and be moving to college. I sat up and took a deep breath. God, please make my father go away and leave me alone. He keeps sticking his big nose in everything I do. Just make him disappear so that I can have a good time at the dance. I got dressed. My date picked me up and we went to the prom. Father followed in his car behind us. When we arrived, Father seemed to vanish into the pink chiffon drapes that hung everywhere in the auditorium. I thank God that he had heard my prayer. At least now I could have some fun. Midway through the dance, Father came up behind the drapes and decided to embarrass me again. He started dancing with my girlfriends. One by one, he took their hand and led them to the dance floor. He then clumsily moved them in circles as the band played. Now I tried to vanish into the drapes. After Jane had danced with him, she headed my way. Oh no, I thought. She's going to tell me he stomped on her foot or something. Grace, she called, you have the greatest father. My face fell. What? She smiled at me and grabbed my shoulders. Your father's just the best. He's funny, kind, and always finds the time to be where you need him. I wish my father was more like that. For one of the first times in my life, I couldn't talk. Her words confused me. What do you mean? I asked her. Jane looked at me really strangely. What do you mean, what do I mean? Your father's wonderful. I remember when we were kids, I'd sleep over at your house. He'd always come into your room, sit down in the chair between the twin beds, and read us a book. I'm not sure my father can even read, she sighed, and then smiled. Thanks for sharing him. Then Jane ran off to dance with her boyfriend. I stood there in silence. A few minutes later, Paul came to stand beside me. He's sure having a lot of fun. What? Who? Who's having a lot of fun? I asked. Your father. He's having a ball. Yeah, I guess. I didn't know what else to say. You know, he's always been there, Paul said. I remember when you and I were on the mixed double soccer team. He tried out as the coach, but he couldn't run up and down the field, remember? So they picked Jackie's father instead. But that didn't stop him. He showed up at every game and did whatever needed to be done. He was the team's biggest fan. I think he's the reason we won so many games. Without him, it would have just been Jackie's father running up and down the field yelling at us. Your father made it fun. I wish my father had been able to show up at least one of our games. He was always too busy. Paul's girlfriend came out of the restroom, and he went to her side, leaving me once again speechless. My boyfriend came back with 2 glasses of punch and handed me one. "Well, what do you think of my father?" I asked out of the blue. Terry looked surprised. "I like him. I always have." "Then why did you call him names when we were kids?" "I don't know, because he was different, and I was a dumb kid." "When did you stop calling him names?" I asked, trying to search my own memory. Terry didn't even have to think about it. The day he sat down with me outside by the pool and held me while I cried about my father and mother's divorce. No one else would let me talk about it. I was hurting inside, and he could feel it. He cried with me that day. "I thought you knew." I looked at Terry, and a tear rolled down my cheek as long-forgotten memories started cascading into my consciousness. When I was 3, my puppy got killed by another dog. My father was there to hold me and teach me what happens when the pets we love die. When I was 5, my father took me to my first day of school. I was so scared. So was he. We cried and held each other that first day. The next day, he became my teacher's helper. When I was 8, I just couldn't do math. Father sat down with me night after night, and we worked on math problems until math became easy for me. When I was 10, my father bought me a brand new bike. When it was stolen because I didn't lock it up like I was taught to do, my father gave me jobs to do around the house so I could make enough money to purchase another one. When I was 13 and my first love broke up with me, my father was there to yell at, to blame, and to cry with. When I was 15, and I got to be in the Honor Society, my father was there to see me get the accolade. Now, when I was 17, he put up with me no matter how nasty I became or how high my hormones raged. As I looked at my father dancing gaily with my friends, a big toothy grin on his face, I suddenly saw him differently. The handicaps weren't his, they were mine. I had spent a great deal of my life hating the man who loved me. I had hated the exterior that I saw, and I had ignored the interior that contained his God-given heart. I suddenly felt very ashamed. I asked Terry to take me home, to overcome with feelings to remain. On graduation day at my Christian high school, my name was called, and I stood behind the podium as the valedictorian of my class. As I looked out over the people in the audience, my gaze rested on my father in the front row, sitting next to my mother. He sat there in his one and only, specially made suit, holding my mother's hand and smiling. Overcome with emotions, my prepared speech was to become a landmark in my life. Today, I stand here as an honor student, able to graduate with a 4.0 average. Yes, I was in the Honor Society for 3 years and was elected class president for the last 2 years. I led our school to championship in the debate club, and yes, I even won a full scholarship to Kenton State University so that I can continue to study physics and someday become a college professor. What I'm here to tell you, fellow graduates, is that I didn't do it alone. God was there, and I had a whole bunch of friends, teachers, and counselors who helped. Up until 3 weeks ago, I thought they were the only ones I would be thanking this evening. If I had thanked just them, I would have been leaving out the most important person in my life, my father. I looked down at my father and at the look of complete shock that covered his face. I stepped out from behind the podium and motioned for my father to join me on stage. He made his way slowly, awkwardly, and deliberately. He had to drag his left foot up the stairs as he used his deformed right arm to balance his gait. As he stood next to me at the podium, I took his small, crippled hand in mine and held it tight.